All right.
Welcome to Book Bash night number 2. Ishmael and I were having the best time. I didn't really want to let everybody in, Ishmael. I got to say, I was having a very good time, just the two of us, but I had to let everybody into the party. You are just so terrific to do this. It is a thrill to continue with Reading with Robin's biggest book bash. I watched your video many times. Thank you for doing that. It was awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure. And reminding everybody that a portion of tonight's proceeds go to benefit Rhode Island Food Bank and Share Our Strength. And copies of Little Family can be purchased right down there where it says Buy Little Family here. And I've put Ishmael's email address in the chat bar so you can click on that. And from there, I'm not his email, sorry, his website. I'll put his phone number. You can all text Ishmael his website, and from there you can find him on Instagram, on Twitter, like the Facebook page, follow him, and all of that fun stuff. And now the introduction. Ishmael Beah is the Sierra Leonean and American author of the novel Radiance of Tomorrow and the memoir A Long Way Gone, which was a number one New York Times bestseller and has been published in more than 40 languages. A UNICEF ambassador, an advocate for children affected by war, and a member of the Human Rights Watch Children's Advisory Committee. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife and their children, who I heard a lot about. I love the stories. His latest novel, Little Family, is out. It came out the end of April. Welcome to Reading with Robin's Book Bash, Ishmael Beah.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm going to hold it up again. Do you have a copy as well?
I do.
Good. This is like my favorite picture. Thank you. And I see you have a nice poster behind you also. So you're all decorated in Little Family. And the people have spoken, and they would love to hear you read a bit. So will you start us off with a short reading, and then we'll get into questions. And audience, if you have questions, again, put them down here where it says, ask a question.
Absolutely. I think I would just read the early opening of the book because it kind of calls in the reader into the story, and you kind of meet the characters and they tell you how they want to tell you their story. So it's a very short piece as well. If you were to walk toward a field that lies at the edge of the small town of Folia, when the sun is awake in the sky, you will hear the breeze whistling through the grasses, parting the dry and green strands as it makes its way to you. Or maybe you will think it is the rustling of someone hiding under the vast shrubs. At the end of the field, your eyes will light up on the face of a boy among the grasses, peering intently at something. You try to see what it is by following the trail of his gaze, but you see nothing. Hello, you say. The boy does not respond, only narrow his eyelids against the wind. You stare back at his face, in which youth is steeped in something serious and old, in stories you want to know. You try your luck again. Good morning. You do not know what else to say. Caution trumps curiosity. You sense that you should not move closer. He does not respond. In fact, nothing about his demeanor suggests that he is even aware of your presence. Your eye search his face one last time. Then you give a sigh and continue on your way. Yet as you go, you glance back, still hopeful of an answer. And then, just as you have given up and turned your full attention to the road ahead, you hear him whistle. Immediately, several answering whistles fill the air. You become confused. Should you move on ahead or go back to the boy? You are more aware of your fear now, but at the same time, your belly burns with cautious excitement. You do not know which feeling to pursue. While you hesitate, the shrubs begin a vigorous dance, but when you look again to where the boy was sitting, he is gone, without your having heard him leave. You set aside your fear and try all the pathways that are visible to you, but none goes any distance. Each time you find yourself returned to where the boy was sitting, the smaller plants stretching to regain themselves in the wake of his human weight.
Thank you. Did you read the audio version? Did you do the
No, I did not. Usually, for the memoir, I did, but for the fiction, I try to live it because there are people who it is their profession to read.
Yeah.
So I do not want to take that away from them.
I just love listening to you. So I was thinking, and I don't listen to audiobooks, but I would listen to yours. And yeah, it is a whole different art form for sure. Thank you very much for
You're
that.
very welcome.
People really enjoy it, and you get a sense of the book, and it's so beautiful, so lyrical. It came out at the end of April. And I did read somewhere there was talk of changing the pub date because it came out, I mean, it seems like the perfect time for this book to come out in so many ways. But
Mm.
can you tell us a little bit about what that discussion was like and your feelings about it?
Yes, nobody expected where we are in the world now. And so the pub days was set. We'd already had dates for touring and everything, and then COVID happened. And so, my publisher River and I were having a discussion about it, and we all realized that, well, I think the book is perfect for now because it's about five young people who have decided to ostracize themselves from society based on various circumstances of their lives in pursuit of freedom. Know that the society they live in does not fulfill their desires of how they want to be free and how they want to live. And so it's really about how you're born to form a family to survive circumstances that you're faced with beyond your imagination, which is kind of what COVID was. All of a sudden you're stuck so wherever you are with whoever you were, but
Yeah.
also this idea of family, not the traditional sense of it. Is
Mm-hmm.
in each stages of our life we create new families to accomplish the things we want to do. So we thought to ourselves, this is it, this is
It's a perfect book.
the perfect, so we
It's
went ahead with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a completely perfect book, Ishmael. And I was thinking about, I've thought a lot about the books that have come out and recently, and then how they fit into this world and how they would have been received. Other, same amazing books are amazing books, but then you just, I don't know if you sort of, I look for those connections, and I really, that really was startling to me thinking about some of the people who, for whatever reason, kids that got, sort of chose to stay in school or whatever, or people who were traveling and stayed where they were, or people, all sorts of reasons that people stayed in place and um, really having to figure stuff out. So it's quite something, and it's been out for 8 or so weeks now. So what are you hearing from readers?
I'm hearing a lot of wonderful responses from readers, in the sense that, I think people read it and they get the message about what it is. One of the things that I try to do in the book, which I think is what I've always felt, that I didn't want to give too much backstory to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to really hear what the readers thought about that. A lot of readers in the beginning, when they were reading, they thought, "Well, I need the backstory," but then when they finished the book, they realized it was not necessary.
Yeah.
And my thinking about that is that as a human being, the way you react in the present says a lot about your past.
Mm-hmm.
When something happens and we react, we think it's because of that moment. It's not. It's because of layers and layers of who we are. So in this book, I carefully try to craft a situation where the character's backstory without me having to tell you, just by what they're doing in the present. But also that is a trust in your reader's imaginative capacity to draw those conclusions, right? So
Yeah.
the story becomes theirs as well.
I that's so it's really meeting the characters where they are at
Yeah.
the moment, and that is true of people. At some point things come out, or maybe not the story so much is just the way somebody will act will
Mm.
tell you something about where they come from. So talk about your five main characters, this little family, and I'm chatting with Ishmael Beah. Visit his site at ishmaelbeah.com for more information. You can find him on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and read all about, I mean, just everything that he writes. You will, if you haven't read any of these books yet, you're in for a treat. So yeah, so tell us how you came to these five characters, who they sort of represented to you, and how they come together.
Well, I started with the idea of wanting to answer the question about what freedom means for young people growing up in various African countries, but anywhere in the world, where they don't necessarily believe in the status quo. there's an import of values and morality that they don't necessarily subscribe to, and how do you find your idea of liberty? And so then I was thinking about who are the characters that are perfect to explore this. And I thought it would be young people, because when young people are growing and forming themselves, they're open to possibilities rather than older people who probably may have formed a lot of themselves. So I decided to
Are
choose.
over. Yeah. Those old people have had it. Yes.
But then I was going home to Sierra Leone in my home country, and as I was landing on the side of the runway, there's this abandoned plane that's like beautifully covered in this foliage that kind of was screaming and refusing to be forgotten. So I looked and I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to set the novel.
Wow.
So every time I went back home, I would return there. And because I know people in the country, I was able to go see the airplane, so that I didn't look like I was up to something near the airport, that could get me into problems. I was doing research. But then I thought to myself, okay, I need characters. And my first was I wanted a young Black African girl, because I wanted to show the strength of women, particularly because there's a lot of the way sometimes, particularly African Black girls are presented is not quite strong in literature. So I wanted a young woman who's unapologetically herself and intelligent is strong word, but also she's battling between what it means to grow into a woman, how she's finding her femininity. Um, and also I realized that because, I'm married and I have two daughters, that oftentimes women have to are caught between taking care of those they love and taking care of themselves, and they often make the sacrifice of just forgetting themselves to take care of those they love. And I wanted a character that doesn't do that, because I don't want my girls to do that. So
Remember that.
I want them to take care of themselves. I think women have done enough to take care of other people, that they should always, if it comes to that, they should choose themselves. So there's her, and then there's another younger girl that she's kind of mentoring, and then you have three boys. So you have Kudimata, then you have Namsa, you have Eliman, who kind of is a big reader. So even when they're going about surviving, he always has a book in his pocket trying to read. And then you have Pindi and Devi, who are kind of street savvy. So I brought kids who have different skill set, different ways of surviving to make this family that is quite interesting. They challenge each other, and they live outside of society, and they have to go into society to fend for themselves. And they walk apart. So they're already doing social distancing before.
Yeah, I know, the book is so
which is kind of strange when
right, because they don't want to be together, they don't want to be seen together, so that is how they move about in the outside of their home.
Exactly.
Right.
Because they realize that when people see them together, it could be a possibility to break their family apart. So when they are not recognized outside together, but in their environment, in their world, they are together.
Yeah, so you were on top of social distancing before. I never even heard that term before, before this. I never knew it. But you had it here in Little Family. People are asking, and I know this question has been asked, and I know the answer, but I will ask you anyway. Where is this book set? I know the answer. Yeah.
I decided to make it in an unnamed country. I wrote it in several countries. I wrote it, I was living in Mauritania, I was living in Senegal, I was living in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria, and in Los Angeles. So all of these places had an impact on my imagination. I didn't want to set it anywhere, because I feel like the characters and what they're doing and their stories are applicable in so many settings. I've had some people say Sierra Leone, I've had some people say Zimbabwe even,
Right. And that's the thing, it just transcends place. But
Absolutely.
that is that something people were asking? Were they trying to figure it out? It's interesting what people want to figure out, and it was more the the sense of where they were. It was more about the family, which is a really cool element and way to present the story. But yeah, what are some of the top picks of where people thought?
One of the things is also I wanted to introduce a contemporary African cities, because I think very little is known about that. So this little family, one of them, Kudimata, become friends with the beautiful people who are sort of wealthy and the very affluent people that you find in any African city, who are well traveled, but they return home to live there. and so she gets mixed up with them, and this threatened the sort of the stability of their family. And she's taken by them, by their life, but also she's very intelligent in her own way. She sees things differently. So you get to see these two different worlds and how they rub against each other, which is also what is happening now in the United States and in the world, where the two worlds that are coexisted but kind of ignored each other are now rubbing because of circumstances. And
Right.
people are now realizing, oh, I didn't know they existed. And we were like, well, we knew you existed. So kind of
Yeah.
I played that a
That's
lot in the narrative. So you get to see the wealthy in an African context. And even you also get to think about through when I write, I'm always trying to use moments and even places are characters in my story. So, for example, when the characters go to a restaurant, it's not just because they want to go to a restaurant, is that the restaurant plays a role in the characterization of who they are. For example, they're at a restaurant and they're discussing about food.
hmm
Why are there restaurants in where they live that do not have the local food on the menu, but rather they have all these foreign foods, and people eat it to pretend that they are sophisticated. What does that say about who they are? Like
right.
if you go to Italy, you're not going to have Sierra Leonean food on Italian menu, and then if you want pasta, you're going to have to fight the chef to make pasta for you. It's kind of like it says a lot about the kind of environment you live in.
Yeah. So you sort of play with that, poke fun at it a little bit, which, is really, such a keen eye. And I think that the story works on so many different levels, and reading that, everything is just so clever and purposeful. Like there's
Mm.
nothing, like what is the editing process like for you? Because it would seem that just everything is so necessary in the story. It's not like, oh, why is this here? Like it's all so purposeful and flows so beautifully. It's such a gorgeous story. So how is that for you? You like to just give us what we need.
Well, when I start to write, every writer has a different methodology. But when I'm writing, what I usually do is that I spend maybe 6 months to a year thinking about the characters, the location, who they are, their mannerisms, their age, how they speak, and I really try to inhabit each one of them. And for this
Oh,
particular characters, because there were two girls, and clearly I'm not a woman or a girl, so I
whatever.
had to really undo my masculine POV to be able to get into the head and the psychology. And I even had to do a little bit of research on how to talk about women's clothing because I think for at least for me as a man, I don't think I think I dress more functionally. I don't think I really take something I think, oh, well, this will really look, it makes me feel or it's soft, or I don't think that. I just put it on. So when I was writing, I really had to think to get that, and I realized something that uh, men don't know anything about women. Even the few that think they know a little bit don't. So it was a very humbling experience to really make myself vulnerable to learn. And my wife, who is my first reader, sometimes I wrote certain things I give to her. She said to me, "A woman would never say or think
Oh, I
that."
love that. Do you
And I'm
remember?
like, wow, man, let me go back and try to see what I can. And my
I
editor is also a woman. So I had these two women sort of really teaching me. I learned a few things after this. I won't claim that I know,
I
but
love that. Can you think of something specifically that your wife said? No way would I, or your editor? I'm
no,
curious.
because for example, I was trying to Kudimata. The book starts when she's a young girl, and then as she's growing, she begins to feel a certain sensuality about who she is.
Right.
Um, and obviously, as a man, when I started talking about that, there was certain ways I looked at it. That's what a young boy would think or man would think when a
Right.
woman is sensual. It has nothing to do with sexuality. It's
Right.
completely different. And I knew that to some extent, but not the depth of it. In the
Yeah.
sense that, for example, um, when she walks on the street, how people look at her does something to how she carries herself you know. But I started observing this also, and this is what informed myself the character. When I became a father, I think, and my first child is a girl, and I started paying attention to things that perhaps I didn't pay attention to before, truly, which is that the world is made for men to succeed, is set up so that the man can function and then the woman can kind of fend their way around. So I really started to see that with my daughter, even when she was little. For example, we were in Senegal and we were on a boat crossing into Dakar, And there were these men and young boys in the boat, and they were looking at my daughter, and they basically were talking out loud so we can hear and be like, "We can see she's a girl, but why don't they pierce her ears so we know immediately she's a girl?"
Wow.
And that disturbed me so much. And I thought to myself, what place is there for men to decide how a girl should express themselves?
Sure.
Why
Wow.
should it be easy for the man to know that?
Right.
It
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't matter. Who are you to? I almost threw them into the water.
I
That's another story. But
right. Your dad thing must have just taken over that instinct. And how old was your daughter at this
she
point?
was about a year and a half old.
Babe, babe, right.
She was a
Wow.
baby, but already men were deciding how she should present herself. So I started to unearth some of these things. So that really fed into how I built the girls in this novel, particularly because I wanted them to be those kinds of women who would not who would not be shaped by what a masculine POV wants them to be. So as I was writing, I had to really finesse those areas to make sure that when she went about walking, but she also used that invisibility not to be feminine as an armor to hide herself from the world. So when she becomes how she wants to be and she gets all these eyes on her, it's very difficult. And so there's a sentence in the book where I talk about how men don't realize that when they stare at a woman, the things they will awaken in that woman based on what their experiences have been with men who look at them a certain way. I don't think men even are aware, or boys are even aware of these things. They don't get trained. So it was a very humbling experience for me to go through that.
Wow.
Let's just say I learned a lot. So when my daughter is growing up, I'll be watching those boys with very strong, keen eyes.
I have no fear. I also see you like heading the feminist studies department at one of the colleges near you in California or something. It really, when you really break it down like that, just every little piece of what is expected of a young girl, woman, child, and what society sort of dictates and what one falls into. But when you're a parent and you see it the other end, that's I could feel you on the boat.
Yeah, there's even moments, like I've experienced moments before my travel around the world where you find certain men who feel like they have power over women, which is usually an illusion. When women make a man feel you have power over them, is an illusion so that you can leave them alone. You can never control women, only if they allow you, and it would only last for so long. So I try to tell my friends that I say, no, you can't. There's an illusion that men have. But sometimes when there's violence directed towards women or young girls, there's always an expression that I've witnessed and observed that men say, whether in war-torn places or even men who feel that they can get away with things, where they will say, I'm going to make a woman out of you. And I always thought to myself, well, a man cannot make a woman out of how can you even do that? Like, the fact that a man is standing or any human being is standing is because a woman gave birth to you. So actually, it's the opposite way. They will make a human being out of you and not the other way. So when I was writing, I wanted to emphasize these things to really give power where it belongs to the woman, to the black woman, to the black girl, particularly in this narrative. But also to talk about the idea of intelligence, because I think the idea of intelligence is also sometimes correlated to education, to going to school and having intelligence is not education. You go
Right.
to school to learn how to function in society, but not to be intelligent and be reflective about things. In fact, if you don't pay attention, you lose your imagination through education,
There,
your
there's
imagination capacity.
yeah, there's a big misconception that is
Yeah.
where intelligence lies, or where that is fed, and that's another societal norm. And you shine a light on so many things, and that's the thing about reading and discussing books and having empathy and understanding people. I mean, this is so fascinating, and we are talking about Little Family. Although I could listen to you talk about your daughter and women, and also I know we were talking earlier about the oral tradition, storytelling, and your grandmother. So is some of that? Did you put some of your grandmother into the female characters in the book?
Yes, I mean, when I was a boy, I grew up before I went to school. I already knew the structure of a story through the oral tradition. And in my culture and in my tribe in particular, we believe that stories are medicine that are poured into the human being to strengthen them so that they can face life, because life is always going to try to break you one way or the other. There's no escaping it. And the belief is that if the human being has a lot of stories within their veins, within their mind, then they don't completely snap. that they have a foundational element, a place they can go to draw from, to draw resilience and strength and hope from. So when I started writing, I always thought of myself, everything that I've written, I see it as a little medicine that I can pour back into the world to move humanity further along in this idea that we are each other's keepers. Once we forget that, the world begins to collapse, which is what we're seeing
We
nowadays as
see,
well,
right,
right?
right. No, we
As soon
see.
as, even before, people used to say, I've lived in the United States for a bit, and I always used to tell people from things that I've written before, I used to draw this idea that mm, the idea of being independent is an illusion. Yes, you can be independent, but once you're taken away from the human community, it does something to you, and you would feel lonely. You have psychological issues, and people say, "Oh, but that's the African thing. People don't have independence." I say, no, we do have independence, but I am because we are. And so COVID happened, and people went inside, and they realized that they can't stand being alone.
Right. Isn't that interesting? It's
you know,
so, there's so many things that have been so brightly illuminated through this, but
yeah,
you're right, and also about being just the way that we're moving about in the world and minding our health, but minding our neighbor's health, and that how important that is, and so that is where we are each other's keepers, and so you do see what happens when people aren't mindful of that. It's
ab-
so cause and effect,
absolutely. No, even the fact of seeing another human being, even when you don't say hello to them, there's something that it does to your humanity just to know
Yeah.
that there's somebody else, around, And for years, when I wrote fiction about this, people thought, but he's just that African sort of folktale stuff. He doesn't really, no, this is real stuff.
No, it is. I remember the first time I saw a person outside of this house, and I was like, it's a person, or driving by, like waving, like there's a person there.
Absolutely.
It's so necessary, and
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
that's taken away, you know.
Mm,
And as a writer, I mean, you talk about that, and a lot of writers will talk about the solitude, and that that's how they sort of are, and some more than others. So for and a lot of writers have said this has been an extremely creative time for them, and this is how they survive. I think sometimes that's a little bit of hyperbole, but for you,
mm.
do you like that space, or are you more, would your norm to be more out and about in the world?
I'm always out and about in the world just because I'm naturally curious. I believe that to have a stronger imagination as a writer, you need to have a direct interaction with the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I travel quite a lot. Um, I don't necessarily need to go in the woods to write. I actually make time for it. But each to their own. And but it's been interesting to be home because usually it's my space to create and everybody goes to school. But it's also been really
Yeah.
interesting to see how my children learn and what they, to administer their classes to them via the internet and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, to observe them. And that I really welcome that because I'm always on the road. So for me, this has been, and also somebody like me, I believe, I have gone through so many crises in my very short lifetime that this is just another crisis that is on top of others that I know. And
Right.
for a lot of people, maybe they are 50, 60, this is the first real crisis they've had to go through. So I can see the impact on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, I was in these characters. What you see about them in this book is that because of the circumstances of their lives, they are sort of psychologists, economists, anthropologists, because every day of their life they have to look at how everybody is behaving to be able to succeed in
Yeah.
finding something to eat. So I think oftentimes we belittle the intelligence of people who may be at the bottom of society, but we forget that they're actually keen observers of how the
No, sure.
cracks in our culture and our societies, because they are dealing with those cracks every single day. So I try to show these characters to sort of show you those cracks through their actions.
And that's the thing about survival, and also you had said earlier about the young woman who goes, is taken by this other family and this other life, and so that's where you've got your unit and their family, these
Mhm.
five, and then anything outside of that where you sort of open up to another possibility or intrigued does sort of shake that foundation, depending on how strong that foundation is. So I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. And there's such you show us in the characters and in the storyline all of this intelligence, but it's I think if somebody is thinking that there's only one way to be intelligent, that's kind of very foolish. That's actually very foolish. So I think, and also not having those backstories, that's another, not telling us specifically where the story is, because it could be anywhere, not giving us backstory that we really don't need, that we can figure out, or that we meet people where they are. There's just so much to this book, and it's Little Family. I'm going to get to everybody's questions. It's Little Family by Ishmael Beah. Don't miss this book, and visit his site at ishmaelbeah.com. I'm going to see if you have questions, you can put them in the little question box. Okay, this first question isn't really a question. One question said, I read A Long Way Gone when it was released, and it has grown to mean so much to me. Can you talk about your personal experiences that have shaped your writing and what the transition from memoirs to novelist was like? Also, they would like to know about being on $1 million listing. You knew that question was coming.
Yeah. I was waiting for that question to come.
It's coming. It was coming, Ishmael.
But well, I'm not one of those people who always knew I wanted to write, as some people. I loved literature and reading since I was a kid, even though I didn't have access to books. Obviously, I grew up in an oral tradition culture, so I knew the essence and importance of stories. But I never thought of myself somebody who would grow to be a writer. I really arrived at writing through frustration and a necessity. After I came out of the war in Sierra Leone, I was adopted in a family in New York, in a Jewish family in New York, which is a whole other story of its own.
I hear that now.
So I was, when I came to live with this family, and my mother started to take me into schools, to admit me into schools, and I entered the United States with only my passport in hand and nothing else, and literally walked out of JFK, and this woman took me home and started having this family in my life. And so she took me to the schools to admit me, and most of the schools refused to admit me because I didn't have a report card to show that I had been in school before. And I was like, well, I'm standing in front of you. English is not my first language. It's like my seventh language. So the fact that I can speak it shows that I must have been to some school, but that was insufficient. So I decided to write an essay that was titled Why I Do Not Have a Report Card. And in this essay, I try to explain that in some parts of the world, some people don't have report cards because when you're running for your life, it's not the thing that you think about. You're not thinking, oh, whoa, let me get my report card.
My report card. I'll be right back.
Exactly. Some people didn't have the sense of humor when I brought it up like that. They were like, okay, he's still traumatized. So I started writing out of a frustration to correct that perception, and also of my country, because everybody knew about Sierra Leone because of the war, and that's all they knew with no context. Now, when I decided to switch to fiction, I think the fiction was easier for me in the sense that in fiction, you can play more with language, you can play with characters, whereas in the nonfiction, it was complicated. It was also around the time when, I don't know if you remember, James Fry or somebody had made up a story.
Pieces and
exactly. So
little bullshit pieces of something.
Exactly. So I was coming right at the heels of that. So everybody was on their guard, and where journalists were kind of asking this question about, well, how do we know you were running on that path? And so it was very hard because journalists, when they insert themselves in situations to write about it, they come ready with tape recorder, with a paper to make notes. When you experience life and you come out of it, you don't have that. You rely on the best of your memories, right? And also, we were talking about this earlier in the green room. I come from a tradition that believes there's no singularity in truth, that there's plurality because of, again, layers of who we are. If we all leave tonight and we talk about this evening, our rendering will be very different, but yet it'll be very truthful to tonight, right? So I was battling those things. So I thought to myself, all right, this is enough fiction. I don't have to deal with any of this stuff. So actually, fiction was much easier to write psychologically as well,
Yeah. That's
so more lighter part about the $1 million list.
Yeah, so they want to hear that. Yeah,
I've gotten a lot of emails from people I haven't heard from in a long time, all the way down to high school. I didn't know many people watch such things, but this actually is not new. We did this thing about a year, probably more ago, where we had bought a home and we decided to sell it because we're leaving the country and traveling again. And we didn't want to do the show, but My wife and I decided that it was important to do because we thought we want to show people who look like us to know that you can make it from nothing to something,
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
to show that because we didn't come from wealth of generational wealth. We worked to make money,
Right.
and then so then I saw a lot of people who were like, Mike, they were like, somebody opened the door, and I was like, wait a minute, that guy looks familiar. Is that Ishmael Beah?
Oh, that's
I
so.
got a lot of these emails. It was funny.
Oh, you did. You heard from a lot of people.
I
Did
heard from a lot of people.
Did you hear from the person who wanted to see your report card when you came to this country?
I'm sure they were thinking, well, I wish I had taken that kid in my school.
Right? I know. But I think that that's really, I love that everything that you do has such intention. And so to really think about why you wanted to do that and to show people, where you came from, what you built up, that is interesting. And then did you wind up staying because you're here, or did
Yeah,
you?
we had sold the house because we realized that we are not those types of people. It's complicated to own a home, and it's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
if you are not there to live in it, it's a real difficult task. So we were living in Nigeria, and we had to manage this house here. And
Oh,
we were like, okay, that cannot work. So when we returned, we came, and we still live in LA now, but we just didn't think it was who we are to own something
yeah.
that we have to manage like that. People have different lifestyle, but it was a good learning process to know.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah. I was wondering if because somebody had emailed me and asked me, and I said, I don't watch that show. I don't know. Which book, I watch TV, but not that, I just hadn't seen it. Which book affected you the most, or pick a book that had a deep effect on you? That's a hard question, but a book.
That's I'm a big reader, which when I have taught writing in various universities, I've thought that when kids come to me and say, well, how can I be a good writer? And I ask them, how many books did you read this month? And they say nothing. I'm like, well, you catch a lot of work. They usually don't like that response.
Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Yeah.
But so I read a lot, but I've had a few writers that have had impact on me. One of them is J.M. Coetzee, is a South African writer. And he's just a master at prose, the way his sentences move. And also Albert Camus, a Nigerian French writer. Edwidge Danticat, who's a Haitian woman, right? I remember when I was in university, I read The Famine of Bones, one of her books, and there's one called Crick Crack. And I really loved this. And I drove all the way to Michigan. I was at Oberlin undergrad. She was giving a talk there. We rented a college van, and I drove it in the snow just to go to her talk. So I've had writers who really moved me because of the things they write about and also how they use language over the years that I go back to. So these are a few, that I've,
Do you have any of them listed on your website? Because people will ask me later, or maybe you can post it in this chat bar. Maybe post a few of the titles.
Yeah, sure.
You have homework to do after this.
I would do so. Absolutely.
Not all party. You want to put
if you follow my social media, I've posted quite a bit of books. For example, when I was a kid, one of the earliest books that I read, I had this. One of my teachers in my village was the English teacher when I was a boy in Sierra Leone before the war and all of these things. We didn't have many books, but he had a few things, and he had them at his house on a veranda, and he had a bucket of water and soap. And so when you came, he would make you wash your hands with the soap and dry it in a towel, and then he would lend you the book. And I remember, and he would basically stand on top of you and watch you. And if you turn the page too hard, he would give you that look, and you're like, okay, I'll be nice.
Oh, do you think of him when you read? Like when
you
turn
all the time. Yeah, I always tell my kids, be nice to the page, be respectful.
Be nice to the book. I know. Oh, it is amazing, like the things that we grow up with, where they are always whispering somehow in our ear, and
absolutely,
and you don't know that effect that you have on where something that you've seen. That's amazing to me. Be nice to the book.
So for example, I read like Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. It was really my first early book that I read. I had a character that was a young boy in it, Jim Hawkins. So I ran around my village pretending I was Jim Hawkins, and I caused a lot of problems. People didn't like that.
You did? What did you cause? What problems?
Oh, I would try to pick the ladder from the roofer who was fixing the roof and pretend I was climbing the mast of the ship. And then when he would come down, he would fall because he didn't know. and I'll get into water gourds, and people pour water on my head, and they freak them out when I came out because I was hiding in the apple barrel. I caused so much, and so they used to say to me, "Something is rough off with this kid. He reads too many of those books. He's getting to his head." But I thought it was
Right. And you were nice with the pages too, but like, yeah, so you had that imagination and that spirit, and just like I could just imagine a very playful, curious,
yeah,
so you saw a ladder and you needed it. You didn't think
yeah.
someone's up on top there needs to get down. You take the, that makes sense.
I was in the zone. I was in the story.
Yeah, you were actually right. People don't, sometimes it takes a while for people to catch up and appreciate. What was the question? Oh, somebody said they bet you don't dog ear a book. Do you bend back pages? Do you, or no?
No, I absolutely don't. In fact, I have, in the beginning when I've collected books since I could afford them. When I was in high school, I walked in the summer and I just buy books. And if a friend starts to read my book and they fold the page, I will never lend them a book again. That's basically a no for me. Or I would just buy them another one and say,
here,
you keep the one you folded, I keep this one, but that's now yours. So I'm very.
That's so funny. Yeah, lending books to people can be fraught. You think you do a good thing. Then there's like ever getting them back. Sometimes there's that.
No, I buy people books. If they want my book on my shelf, I say, I'll buy it from you. I'm not giving you the one.
I love that. Right here, take it, keep it, pass it along. So you don't write in them either? Then I would guess in the mart. Do you write in them?
The ones that I read in university, I wrote in.
Yeah.
And so it's good because when I pick them up, I can see how I was thinking at that time when I want to reread them. But then I'll buy a cleaner version. So I try not to. Whenever I go to the bookstore, my wife tells me, "Don't take your wallet," because by the time I come back.
No, I know. I mean, it's such an amazing thing to have such, bounty to be around. And is your wife a big reader? I would imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have so many books everywhere in the house. It's all we have, so it's nice. When we move, it's kind of a bit of a.
Yeah, well, books are heavy to move. I learned that the hard way when we moved, because I had my books in whatever order I wanted them. And I remember when movers came, they were like, "Lady, we can't pick this. You're supposed to pack books in smaller." But I was like, I don't know. I had a lot of books. I had big boxes. What did I know? But they're hard to pick up. So are you able to part with any of them, or do you like save them all, or are you able to let them go?
I save them all. Every book that I've had since I was in high school, I still have them.
Yeah.
And I carry them with me because they have a life of their own. They have a memory. You remember a certain time of your life, a certain aspect of how you were thinking. And also when you read them again, you realize how much growth you've made in terms of how you perceive the world, what you react to. And sometimes you read the same book and you pick up on things you've missed. So I'm always,
I love, being surrounded by books is the greatest. That I always say that's sort of my artwork. That's my, I just love to have it. And it's very, just even seeing a spine of a book, I do remember where I was, when I read it, what else was happening, how I read it. And we have a lot of people writing that too. People, you are definitely preaching to the choir here. People understand that they are precious. What do you want your readers to take from this little family, into their own hearts, into their own little families?
Well, I think there are many things that I'm trying to get at in this book, but I think the most important one is really these connections and these bonds that we form as human beings, and how we are constantly remaking ourselves as human beings. And that possibility is so much greater, is so much fulfilling to who we are as human beings. And I want people to take away from this book the possibility that existence and living is constantly recreating yourself. If you allow that to happen to you, you actually have a real full life, because then you can create and recreate these new families of yours all over the place that are not necessarily the traditional way, and then you can just have this amazing life, by opening yourself to possibilities and being surprised and things that will happen to you, really. And again, lastly, just remembering that we are each other's keepers. and everything that we do has an impact in the world. For example, in the book there is a scene where Kudimata is encounters this census worker who is kind of like going around taking census of people. He doesn't even know when people leave for work and anything. And she thought to herself that he's a harmless guy, but she's reminded that harmless people always work for wicked bosses. You know,
Yeah.
because what we don't realize, like what you say to people, uh, what your mannerisms are around them, have a ripple effect in the world. And so I want people to be very mindful of those things. To read this book, not necessarily to escape, but to appreciate how they've had to remake themselves as well, and to find newer ways and reflexes to do that somewhere.
It's so thought provoking. It is gorgeous. It is a must. It is a must read, and I love that whole idea, because we are each other's keepers, and I think that people don't always realize, and it does come down to being mindful of the littlest movement and the littlest gesture, what that can trigger in somebody.
Mhm.
And everybody is going through something, and so yeah, being kind is really high up on that ladder, and also keeping the ladder on a house if you still. Do you
Even
think
though,
I'm just thinking of you as a little kid doing that, like that
oh,
is.
I watch my kids and I think to myself, I hope they are not half as troublesome as I was as a kid,
Do
because
you see
otherwise.
do you see a little spark in one
Oh
of
yeah,
them
there's a
here?
lot in
And how do you yeah,
the girl twin. She has
yeah,
a lot of that in her. She's yeah.
and
And
how do you
sometimes she does stuff, and I'm trying not to get mad. I'm just like,
yeah,
oh, I did that before, so I'm just gonna pretend it didn't say it.
yeah, she'll be okay. Yeah, so it is interesting when you see those characteristics in a child, and you think, sometimes it's hard not to laugh because it's funny, but also like about redirecting or what you want to sort of encourage, and then allowing them to be their own person, and then yet now you're the parent. So
Yeah.
what is that like for you?
Actually, before I became a father, I was quite worried about that. When we decided to have a family, I was discussing that. My worry has always been that the way I grew up and my background kind of changed the way I look at the world, for good or for bad. And as a parent, I think your desire to protect your children oftentimes can translate into you passing your trauma on to them, because
Mhm.
giving them your eyes to look at the world because you want to protect them. And so for me, what I've really tried to do is not to do that, to avoid doing that, because I want them to be as naive as possible, to make their own mistakes,
Right.
not fatal ones, but to make their own mistakes and learn from them. I don't want to. So that's been a real tough. For example, even in the morning when they say, "Oh, but I don't want eggs this morning," I almost want to say, "Why?" Some mornings I didn't have anything to eat.
But you
But I'm saying that.
have to stop yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say in my bag, okay, that's not their life. And I would not want them not to have anything to eat. But I still have to let them understand that there are certain people who don't have that fortune. You understand?
Right.
So it's more, and also we travel and live with them in spaces where they understand that people have different lives and live
Right.
differently. So that is sufficient enough for me to
Ah,
to draw that point home.
what a beautiful family. I just, I can only imagine what that must be like. And it is really hard to stop certain things from coming out of your mouth when they're just, it's a reflex. But when you're so aware, when you
Mm.
do your best, and I look forward to watching your little family on Instagram or wherever you choose to share. We were talking earlier about more projects, so I'll be following closely. What else would you like to share? Top picks for books that are either new that are out, or books that you're looking forward to reading, or your wife, or your kids, whoever. Top picks in the household.
I am. I just went. I'm reading Benedict Evaristo's book, Girl, Woman, Order. I'm reading
Uh-huh.
that one, and it's
Yeah.
quite brilliant. I read Maza's book, The Shadow King, and so there's of course The Vanishing Half that came out. So basically, last time I was able to go to a local bookstore recently because I did an online thing for them, and Some people wanted it signed, so I had to go with my mask and glove to
Uh,
sign the books. So while I was there, I just bought.
you brought your wallet. You brought your wallet.
I did bring my wallet. I actually have an account with them, so I didn't have to, which is
Just
dangerous
take
in
it.
some way.
Just take
So,
it. Ishmael's taking it to go. So yeah, Britt Bennett we had on last night. The
yes,
Vanity
exactly. I saw that. Yeah. So that was brilliant. Yeah. She's
book, right?
yeah,
And the Mengistu we had last fall for the Shadow King,
nice.
and it comes out in paperback September
Yeah.
1st. Maybe we're going to do something. We had her in Rhode Island when we could have events. So those two. And did you say a third? Because people will ask me later.
What is the other one that I'm reading? These ghosts are family. This is the other one that we have as well.
These ghosts are family.
Yeah.
Do you have family reading time where everybody like comes together with their books?
Yes, we have several things that we do. We have because we believe that the idea to understand story. First, I think you have to learn how to hear your own voice and understand and believe in your own voice. Because when you're reading, you're hearing something and you imagine, and you have to trust in your thinking. So what we do with our children is that we impart that African tradition in them, where before we start to read books, we tell every night somebody tells a story. It can be anything. You can make up a story. It can be a story about something we've experienced together as a family. And then we ask questions to the other siblings to see what their reaction is from that story. And then from there, we read a book. So now my 6-year-old can read, and 3 years are sort of tickling a little bit. She sometimes she reads at night now to the kids. So we don't just read to our kids every day. We also want them to read. And we also want them to react to what we read to them so that they
Mhm.
can learn to express their opinions about things.
And
So
they're paying attention, right?
oh yeah,
And,
the kids, as
yeah.
you all know, kids they absorb everything. Your
Oh yeah.
pattern of speech. So, for example, when we had kids, I told my wife and I agreed that we would not allow our friends to talk baby talk to them. When some adults come to children, they'd be like, "Oh, but you're so cute." Like, no, the first exactly, they have a brain, that's actually quite active and is trying to pick up information and vocabulary. So when you talk to them.
That's
As
so
intelligent human beings, they respond,
right.
So we tell our friends, nobody does any of that. Or you talk to them like they are intellectuals, and they will respond the same way to you.
Right. Oh, they must be just amazing children. I love that. This was so much fun and so meaningful, Ishmael. I can't even tell you. It's Ishmael Beah's. Hold yours up again, so we'll take one
Oh
more
yes,
picture.
yes. I got to learn at this thing.
No, I'm just teasing with you. Little Family by Ishmael Beah. Visit his website at ishmaelbeah.com and follow him on Instagram and on Twitter and like his Facebook page. And we'll look forward to anything that you are doing. The Reading with Robin gang. Hopefully, we'll get to see you when we're traveling again. We would obviously love to host you here. And everybody, thank you for watching tonight. And Ishmael, if you want to go back later, you can read the questions, and we can, if you guys have questions about which titles, I wrote them down, or I'll just send Ishmael another message and go ring. Or actually, the better thing is you just go back and watch this again. This remains
Yeah.
on Crowdcast. You can watch it over and over and send your friends and say, "Oh my God, you got to see Ishmael. He was amazing." Little Family. Enjoy your family, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for sharing so much of yourself with us tonight.
Thank you to
And
everyone as well for joining, and I appreciate the conversation in the chat.
I loved it. It was such a treat. And I will be back at 8:15, switching gears here, a domestic drama at 8:15 with Kimberly McCree. Thank you, Ishmael.
Thank
And
you.
you all, and thank you very much, everybody. And stay tuned. Be back soon.
Right.
Thank you.